Welcome, curious minds. Today we're embarking on a deep dive into a topic that really touches so many lives, often causing immense distress. Tinnitus. You know,
Mm.
those persistent ringing sounds, buzzing, whistling, maybe in your ears, maybe in your head. It can feel incredibly isolating, overwhelming, really.
Yeah, and what's really insightful here, I think, is that while it causes so much anguish, we're going to explore not just, what it is and maybe why it happens, but also the fact that there's actually significant hope for recovery.
Hope, right?
Our mission today really is to give you a kind of shortcut to understanding this complex condition, to get past that common idea that you just have to, well, live with it.
Absolutely. And to really grasp what's possible, we'll be digging into the most important nuggies of knowledge from our sources. That includes a journey of someone who actually lived through it, found a way to full recovery. We want to help you understand what's truly going on with these persistent sounds. Okay, so let's start with the basics. What is tinnitus exactly?
Well, we're talking about those phantom sounds. Our sources use Spanish terms like pitidos, zumbidos, chirridos.
Which we translate as ringing, buzzing, whistling, chirping, that kind of thing.
Precisely. And they can be in one ear, both ears, or sometimes people feel it like inside their head. And the sources really highlight how incredibly distressing this becomes. It often leads to a pretty significant emotional, psychological downturn.
Which makes you wonder, why does something that feels so physical have such a huge psycho-emotional impact?
That's a really important question. The sources show that lots of people might have these sounds for years, maybe only noticing them when it's quiet, in silence or darkness. But then something shifts. One day it just becomes, well, the source calls it a disaster. It truly unravels a person.
Wow.
That fear of nighttime when the silence seems to just amplify the sounds, that's a really common and frankly debilitating experience for many.
Yeah, and you can see how sensitive people become. There's this anecdote in the sources. Someone suggested playing tinnitus sounds during a live session.
Oh, I remember reading that.
And a viewer just immediately reacted like, please don't play the sound.
Hmm.
It just perfectly captures that intense suffering, that aversion people develop.
It really does.
And unfortunately, that distress, it often gets compounded by something heartbreakingly common, our sources point out.
Let me guess, the advice from doctors.
Exactly. The advice many get from traditional medical professionals is simply learn to live with it. Can you imagine being told that?
Mhm.
Then you go home facing this constant noise. It's a message that just leaves you feeling completely adrift, lost.
But, and this is where it gets interesting, Arnaldo's story, he's someone featured in our sources who just refused to accept that prognosis.
Right. He sought help, what, 4 years ago? Early 30s?
Yeah, desperate for answers. He had already seen 5 traditional doctors,
Aye.
and all of them offered basically the same grim outlook. His journey, though, it powerfully demonstrates that knowledge isn't just about having it, it's about understanding and applying it, and that there's always more to learn.
And Arnaldo's story really nails the difference between being a patient,
Yeah.
someone passively waiting for a cure,
Mm-hmm.
and becoming what the sources call an ascient, which basically means someone who actively does something about their condition. He didn't just wait around. He went after every possible avenue.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Where does tinnitus actually come from? The origins are incredibly varied, and often they're combined. That's a critical point. It's rarely just one single thing.
Okay, so multiple factors usually.
Almost always. It's more like a confluence of factors, often pointing to some kind of systemic imbalance, which also means, a single pill or a quick fix, probably not going to cut it.
Makes sense. So
Well,
what are some of these factors?
Well, first, there's the auditory system itself. Sometimes, if you lose the ability to perceive external sounds, especially high frequencies.
Like age-related hearing loss or noise damage?
Exactly. Your brain's auditory cortex can actually start to, well, create those missing sounds to fill the void.
Wow, okay.
Hmm.
What else?
A very common culprit is the temporomandibular joint, the ATM, your jaw joint.
Right, the jaw. How does that cause ear ringing?
Well, if the condyles, those are the rounded ends of your jawbone where it hinges if they sort of collapse or shift, they can compress nerves right near the ear. And that pressure can trigger these sounds.
Huh. Is there a way to know if that's involved?
Actually, yes. There's an easy test you can try. Move your jaw forcefully forward, then backward. If the tinnitus sound changes, maybe it gets louder, softer, changes pitch, becomes more acute, then it's pretty likely your ATM is playing a role.
Interesting.
And other jaw issues can contribute too, like old amalgam fillings or just biomechanical problems in the joint itself.
Okay, so auditory system, jaw. What else?
The neck. the cervical spine.
Makes sense. It's all connected up there,
Definitely. Things like herniated discs, arthrosis, discopathies, even losing the natural curve of your neck, what they call cervical rectification.
which is like a straightening of the neck.
Exactly. All these things can irritate the spinal cord and the nerves running through there, transmitting issues essentially up towards the brain and ear.
Okay. And then there are some less obvious ones,
Oh, yeah. Believe it or not, our sources point strongly towards digestive and systemic health.
like your gut.
Your gut, absolutely. Issues with the liver, pancreas, stomach, intestines, things like poor digestion, chronic constipation, irritable bowel syndrome, they can all contribute.
How? What's the connection?
It seems related to inflammation and possibly nerve signaling, even something called neuroinflammation, basically. An inflamed brain can play a role. It really is a full body connection.
Okay, so we've got the brain signals, the jaw, the neck, the gut. Quite a list.
Yeah.
But now let's pivot, because this is where it gets really compelling, especially thinking about Arnaldo's story again.
Yeah.
The psycho-emotional factor.
Yes. This is huge.
Arnaldo mentioned it. Tinnitus started about 6 months after a period of really intense accumulated stress, responsibilities, pressure.
And the sources back this up. They suggest a strong link to acute psycho-emotional stress. Interestingly, they even note a statistical observation about sentimental stressors issues related to partners, or specifically male children.
Male children. That's specific.
It is. It's presented as a statistical observation in the sources, perhaps linked to specific types of protective or responsibility-based stress patterns. But the core idea is intense emotional stress.
So why? Why does this kind of stress trigger tinnitus?
It often seems to stem from that classic fight-or-flight response, but specifically in situations where you feel there's a danger, but you can neither fight it nor escape from it. You feel trapped.
Okay. That feeling of being stuck in a stressful situation.
Exactly. And the body, under that prolonged, unresolved stress, can react in various ways, and tinnitus appears to be one of them. This also explains why so many people report their tinnitus gets worse when they feel nervous or anxious. It's a direct reflection of that underlying stress mechanism kicking in.
And you mentioned earlier this idea of learned pain. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, it's like the brain, having experienced the sound often linked with stress, starts to almost expect it or even seek it out, especially when those stress triggers appear. It becomes a learned response, amplifying the sensation's presence.
That's fascinating. So the brain isn't just passively receiving a signal, it's actively participating, even amplifying it based on emotional state.
Precisely. And that's actually a hopeful point, paradoxical as it sounds.
So,
Well, if the brain can learn to amplify or even create this phantom sound, particularly linked to emotional states, it suggests the brain might also have the capacity to unlearn it.
okay. So it opens up avenues beyond just fixing the initial physical trigger.
Absolutely. It implies that cognitive approaches, mindset shifts, emotional regulation, these could be just as crucial, maybe even more crucial for some people, than only addressing the physical side. The two definitely interplay.
Right. Which brings us back to Arnaldo. His journey seems like a perfect example of tackling both. He didn't just focus on one thing.
Not at all. He really is a testament to the power of a holistic, relentless approach. His own words were that he attacked it from all sides.
Like steering a ship, he said. Changes take time. Persistence is key.
Exactly. He didn't just try one therapy, then another. It sounds like he embraced a wide range simultaneously, adapting as he went.
So what did his path actually include? It was quite a list.
It really was. Let's see. There were around 50 sessions of acupuncture.
Okay.
Then 60 to 70 sessions of Reiki.
Wow, that's a lot of Reiki.
And 40 to 50 sessions of osteopathy. This included specific work on his jaw joint, the ATM, and cranial bones, which he apparently found incredibly beneficial.
So lots of hands-on body work.
Huge amount. Then he also explored Dr. Hammer's medicine, which involves specific dietary approaches and immunotherapy, plus intravenous megadoses of vitamin C.
Okay, so nutritional and IV support too.
Yeah. And he didn't shy away from the non-conventional. He sought spiritual help, worked with energy healers,
Right.
and he found this surprisingly effective personal therapy. Apnea swimming.
Apnea swimming. Holding his breath underwater.
Yeah, in a 3-meter deep pool. He said the pressure somehow provided temporary relief, maybe shifting things in the ear or sinuses, or maybe the focus required.
Interesting. Anything else?
Oh, yes. Crucially, the mind. He delved into the Silva method that's about mental control, managing anxiety, cultivating a positive mindset.
Practicing psychomagic, he called it.
Exactly. Visualizing himself already cured, really working on that mental and emotional state. And practically, he used masking sounds like an air conditioner or a fan just to help him sleep, which is a common coping strategy.
So a real mix of physical, nutritional, energetic, and mental approaches.
Absolutely. And through all this, he had a key realization. Anxiety was the base activator for his tinnitus. His attention to the sound actually intensified it.
So that learned pain idea we talked about.
Fits perfectly, and he was very clear. No medication stopped his tinnitus. In fact, things like anxiolytics, he mentioned Rivotril, clonazepam actually seemed to worsen it over time, along with common triggers like coffee, alcohol, and of course, stress.
What really stands out, too, is his self-awareness. Realizing that his irritability, something he apparently used to be almost proud of,
Yeah, he mentioned that.
was actually harming him. He had to consciously re-educate his brain to be calm. He drew inspiration from people like hypnotherapist Enrique Villanueva, used techniques like REM healing, tapping.
It really underscores that quote he mentioned. When you change the way you see things, things change their form. It's about shifting perception.
Profound. So, given all this multifaceted understanding, what are some concrete paths forward for someone listening who's struggling with this?
Okay, so based on the sources and Arnaldo's experience, here are some avenues to explore. And the big caveat always is don't just rest on one single professional opinion. You need to be proactive, be an ASEAN.
Right. Find your path.
Exactly. Because the body can heal if you give it the right support. So, for potential cervical issues, the neck problems. Consider things like ozonotherapy, maybe RPG, that's global postural reeducation, to work on posture and muscle chains, or something called the 3 squares method. Chiropractic or other manual therapies could help unblock nerves and arteries.
Okay, addressing the neck structure. What about the digestive links?
For digestive concerns, maybe visceral osteopathy, which focuses on internal organs. Supplements could be key. Glutamine for the gut lining. Antioxidants like glutathione or N-acetylcysteine, megadoses of omega-3s, and magnesium, especially glycinate or threonate, which apparently cross the blood-brain barrier better.
Magnesium for the brain connection.
Seems to be the idea. And IV therapies like a Myers cocktail might provide overall energy and nutrient support.
And the jaw, the ATM problems.
Manual osteopathic work again. Sometimes dentists use distension plates or splints if needed, and addressing old amalgam fillings might be relevant for some.
What about the auditory system itself?
Specific supplements and dietary changes can be targeted there, though the sources are less specific on which ones without individual assessment.
And finally, the big one, the psycho-emotional factor.
Absolutely crucial. Focus on breathing techniques, simple but powerful. Meditation, positive self-talk, actively countering negative thoughts. And maybe exploring approaches like biodecodification, which tries to uncover the emotional roots of physical symptoms. Learning to control your emotional state seems paramount.
And it's not just about adding things in, right?
Yeah.
It's also about what you avoid.
Definitely. The sources confirm, and Arnaldo experienced, that anxiolytics might offer short-term relief but can worsen things long-term. Coffee, alcohol, high stress levels, clear triggers for many.
And protecting your hearing, that's got to be non-negotiable.
Absolutely. Use earplugs at concerts, loud bars, maybe even when using power tools. Loud noise exposure can easily make existing tinnitus worse or even trigger it in the first place.
So Arnaldo's story. His tinnitus disappeared completely, over 8 months ago now, after years of struggle?
Yeah, it's a powerful beacon of hope. His core advice seems to be, attack it by all means. Don't give up. Seek help widely. Be open. Explore everything from the spiritual to the biological.
Find your unique path.
That's the essence of it.
What an incredible deep dive this has been. Moving from that feeling of despair, so common with tinnitus, towards genuine hope and, importantly, actionable strategies.
Yeah.
Arnaldo's journey, going from being told live with it to full recovery because he took that relentless ASEAN approach. It just really exemplifies the power of personal agency, doesn't it?
It really does. And his story highlights so clearly that the path to healing often involves understanding our inner world, how our stress, our emotions, even our self-talk contribute directly to our physical well-being.
That idea again, perception shapes reality. Change how you see the condition, maybe even how you relate to it emotionally, and you can potentially change its form.
Exactly. It's a powerful concept.
So, as everyone listening reflects on this deep dive, here's maybe a provocative thought to leave you with. If our minds can, in some way, learn to hear a sound that isn't actually there externally, What other learned sensations or maybe even learned limitations might we be experiencing without even realizing it?
Mm.
And more importantly, what power do we then have to unlearn them?
That is definitely a question worth mulling over. We really hope this deep dive encourages you to explore the interconnectedness of your own health, body, and mind, and maybe empowers you to take action, whatever your situation might be.
Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Please share your thoughts, your questions. We're committed to continuing this exploration with you. Until next time, keep diving deep into knowledge.